Okay, hello, good evening, and welcome to the regular city council meeting. It is March 26, 2024 at 7 p.m., and I will call the meeting to order. Madam City Clerk, will you please establish quorum?
Yes. Councilmember Meadows?
Here.
Councilmember Liang?
Here.
Councilmember Fliger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Daley?
Here.
Mayor Weinberg?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Next, I would like to call on Councilmember Flagler to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilmember. The next item of business is a report on closed session. We have not had a closed session since our last council meeting, so there is nothing to report. Next item of business is changes to the order of agenda. Do any council members or staff want to request or propose a change to the order? Okay. We'll move on to our special item tonight. And it is my privilege and honor to read and present a proclamation to our 2023 Los Alton of the Year, Vicki Reeder. Whereas Vicki Reeder has dedicated her creativity, wit, and passion for bringing people together to effect positive changes on the community of Los Altos. Whereas Vicki Reeder has and continues to lead, guide, and participate in impactful local and national community organizations, including the Los Altos Stage Company, the American Association of University Women, the Los Altos Women's Caucus, the Los Altos Community Coalition, the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation, and the Mentor Tutor Connection. Whereas the Los Altos Town Crier aptly declared that, and I quote, Vicki Reeder is a force of nature when it comes to local theater. And Ann Wolf, a mentor program manager at Los Altos High School, said, again quoting, Vicki is creative to the core, whether writing lyrics for the Follies, performing on stage, decorating pumpkins with her mentee, or baking with her students, her artistry shines through. Whereas, in addition to her involvement with community organizations, Vicki Reeder proudly produced the logo, cover design, and line drawings for a resource guide for teachers, covering ecosystems from the San Francisco Bay Area to the Pacific Ocean. Whereas the Los Altos community is privileged to enjoy the annual Follies production in which Vicki Reeder leads a dedicated team writing, producing, and singing a delightfully irreverent reflection on local and national current events. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Jonathan D. Weinberg, Mayor of the City of Los Altos, and on behalf of the entire Los Altos City Council, do hereby recognize Vicki Reeder for her longtime service and congratulate her on being named 2023 Los Alton of the Year by the Los Altos Town Crier. It has been my pleasure to get to know Vicki over the past year. I appreciate all the coffees that we've had, the meetings that we've had. You had a delightful reception earlier this month, I think. And it's wonderful to see that all you contribute to our community is being recognized. And may you keep at it because you are making us better for it. So thank you. And I'd like to invite you to say a few words if you would like.
I happen to have a few words on my card here. Thank you so much. I can't tell you what a wonderful month this has been for me. It's been incredibly special. It was at the city council meeting in 1993 that council chose to save the bus barn building and maintain a theater in that building. And so you're responsible for me being here tonight, really. And it was the beginning of, we've been a tenant in that facility for 30 years. and been your partner in many ways over those 30 years. 1994 was our first year of performance, and this is, here we are. I think we've done about 100 stage plays plus 28 Follies fundraisers there, and number 29 is coming up, and I'm planning to retire again. We really thrived, and I thrived in that little tin shed over there, and it's been great, and I think we are ready to move to something better pretty soon, and I think we have this wonderful relationship of a public-private partnership where we can, and we have this vision that we adopted as a city that says, let's put a theater on a parking plaza downtown. I don't know, some of you I know are on social media, and there's a group called If You Know You're From Los Altos, and a lot of people post things there. And there have been a lot of complaining lately about how terrible Los Altos has become, and it's just not the same, and the orchards are gone, and I used to ride my horse to town, and what happened, and there's feeling this loss. But to me, I've lived here 50 years. I'm very proud that I live here, and I think we're doing better. And so I think I resist countering the argument. I mean, nobody wants to argue on Facebook, ever. But I think we're doing the right things. Maybe Pete. We're growing and we're changing and adapting. And the fact that we're building apartments so different kinds of people can come and join us here, to me, that's all good stuff. So I'm really proud to still be associated with city government and hope that that continues long into the future. And I thank you for this honor, and let's keep moving ahead. Is that what these curtains are for? Yes. She's never off. I have to leave. I'm going to a vocal rehearsal.
Okay, I have to say, given the proclamations, this is probably my favorite part of the job. I enjoy it. If you ever get a chance to be mayor, enjoy it. Next item of business is public comments for items not on the agenda. So if you would like to make a comment on something that we will be discussing later, I would invite you to hold the comment for now. But if you would like to make a comment on an item that we are not discussing today formally, you are welcome to do so now. So, Madam City Clerk, do we have any cards?
Yes, we have 5 cards.
Okay, let's give everyone 3 minutes.
Okay. The first speaker is Mary Beth Bird.
Good evening. Thank you for taking these comments. My name is Mary Beth Bird, and my husband, Mark Dwanzik, and I moved to Los Altos in 1994. Our 2 kids went to Tiny Tots. I'm going to be talking about Tiny Tots, which I'm sure you all are very aware of. And they went from 1998 until 2004 to both the 3s and the 4s programs. The teachers and the program were amazing. Our kids went through the public schools, Springer, then on to Covington when Covington opened, and then Egan and Los Altos High School. Again, amazing schools and experience. I can't say enough good about all our schools here, our public schools. I did a small fundraiser while my kids were at Tiny Tots and taught a scrapbooking class. And believe it or not, I'm still teaching scrapbooking classes, 25 years later. And I'd be happy to do a fundraiser again for Tiny Tots. I think it's important to keep a public preschool option to Los Altos residents. Also, the half-day option seems important. I'm not familiar with the other 2 programs that are sort of underneath that umbrella. I just can speak to Tiny Tots. As a young family moving to this area, I think it's important to have an affordable preschool option. To me, closing Tiny Tots preschool seems very sudden with very little time for community input. I think current parents, including Ben McCann, the excellent organizer who's here tonight, their idea of let's try some fundraising and ways to contribute and help the city to keep Tiny Tots is a part of the solution. And I also brought my kids' scrapbooks from those days, if anyone wants to look at them and see. And Tiny Tots, I went the other night, it looks the same. It really does. I mean, that's a good thing, though, right? I didn't go out to the back, so I didn't see the back, the open part. But I saw the room looks just the same with the stage and everything else. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
The next speaker is Blaine Dewanchik. Oh, hey, look at that.
Hi, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Blaine Dewanchik. You just heard from my mother. I am 28 years old, and I am a graduate of the Tiny Tots class of the year 2000. I am now a local public high school teacher at Woodside High School. And I have really fond memories of growing up attending Tiny Tots, ringing the bell to invite my classmates in for recess, taking our class bear home on the weekends, and including my parents and younger brother in Tiny Tots events, including sing-alongs and other celebrations. I also had the opportunity to stay in touch throughout my education here in Los Altos with Tiny Tots classmates who I still speak to today. As my mom shared, Tiny Tots prepared me really well for my experience as a public school student here in our local schools. And my family and I lived in Los Altos and rented a home here until I was 10, when my parents had the opportunity to buy our first family home in Mountain View. And even though we are no longer Los Altos residents, we continue to gratefully enjoy many public resources in the city of Los Altos, whether that's checking out books from the library or my dad walking our family dog at the community center almost daily. When I was an intern at Hidden Villa Farm in Los Altos Hills, I wrote my graduate school applications at the Los Altos Community Center, where I ended up attending Stanford and got my teaching credential. I also really enjoy attending Justice Vanguard meetings at the community center as well. All of these amenities are valuable because they are publicly owned, welcoming, affordable resources that bring our community together and benefit not only Los Altos residents, but also the local community. Tiny Tots is another example of one of those valuable resources that benefits local families. And I know how much work you all have done to promote equity, especially in terms of housing in our region. To me, this is an opportunity to not reinvent the wheel, but instead maintain a program that promotes equity by providing an affordable option for local families to attend preschool. As a public school teacher, I know how important meaningful, affordable early childhood education is for families, and I encourage you to keep Tiny Tots open in its public model so that it can continue to benefit generations of Los Altons to come, instead of privatizing the program for profit. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ben McCann.
So, as you've heard, Los Altos is currently seeking to privatize its preschool programs. The communicated reason is that the city no longer wants to fund them. The city manager has stated in multiple press articles that the city may be spending up to $250,000 or $300,000. However, the budget for the program shows that the city spent less than a third of that amount on the program in 2023. The city leadership refuses to have the decency to explain why we are threatening to fire all of our preschool teachers by sharing the details of the calculation behind this much larger number. Instead, they're withholding all information until the decision goes to council so that there can be no questioning of it or discussion of alternatives. What good is the city budget if the city instead uses a set of numbers that the public can't review to drive decision making? Furthermore, the city stated just yesterday that, quote, some of the draft documents that are being withheld may have errors and or were not factually correct, end quote. So when the council is asked at its next meeting to fire all of our preschool teachers, the basis will be a set of documents which we don't have confidence in today, and which will be, at best, made available to the public at the 11th hour and had zero review by the public or the city's financial commission. This process has been deeply flawed from day one because the city did not consult with teachers, parents, the Parks and Rec Commission, or any other commission or the broader community. The city held its meeting with parents only after the privatization RFP was released. As a result, the current RFP has glaring holes in it. For example, there is no requirement that the school continue to operate under the same licensing model that it operates under today. The private providers that have expressed interest currently use a different licensing regime, and the existing teachers are not licensed to work at their schools. The Parks and Rec director stated at the meeting with parents that the city has not asked the teachers whether they would even accept an offer from a new provider. Well, let me tell you that many community members have. The teachers have offers to work for other schools. Why do you think they just blindly accept a new employer when they can go elsewhere or decide to retire? As was reported in the Talon, the teachers were told at their Christmas party that they would be laid off. How can the city expect teachers to go along with this plan or attract and retain any employee when it treats them in this way? If this proposal moves forward, we will be losing all of our highly tenured teachers as a result of this disastrously rushed process. When this proposal comes to you at the next council meeting, please delay it for another year or two so that we can involve the community, attempt less drastic corrective actions such as raising tuition for the first time in over a decade, and ensure that we go about any changes in a way that lets us retain our great teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mary Post.
Thank you for listening to me. I come with a very personal story. I'm grandmother of one of the current students, a 4-year-old named Mila. And I don't live in the area, I live out of town. And Mila was born during the COVID epidemic, and she was very reluctant as she got older to have anybody come near her, and even her grandparents. She did not want very much close contact. Then she started Tiny Tots, and the teachers there were so understanding and sensitive to her needs that they met her where she currently was developmentally and made it easy for her to get close to people, actually to the children and to other adults besides her parents. And so I hope and pray that the Tiny Tots stays open from my personal standpoint, and I just assume that the other children have just as personal of contact with the teachers and the small scale of the classrooms. And today was a 2-hug day. Mila hugged me twice without any solicitation. It's a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Marina.
Thanks, Mom, and thank you to all of you today. My name is Marina, and thank you to City Council members and City leadership for listening to me and to all of the other community members advocating for saving the Los Altos preschool Tiny Tots programs, serving children in the age ranges 2 to 5 years old. The loss the community would face if this program is contracted out would be immense and has not gone unnoticed. You can see various ways, such as the Town Crier article, a petition that not only parents and former parents are very concerned, but also many other community members. I'm a physician, specifically a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. But more importantly, I'm a mom of a lovely 4-year-old daughter who attends Tiny Tots Play School and is in her 2nd year there. She asked me the other day, I'm going to school at the community center when I'm 5, right? I took a deep breath and I told her I wasn't sure and that there was a chance we might do something different. I let her know that the teachers may not be there that we thought were going to be there, who she has met and was looking forward to having, as is a logical 4-year-old response. So she cried. How do we explain something like that to our children when it's hard to explain to ourselves why this change would make sense for the community? The children in Tiny Tots Play School are not old enough for most public school offerings. What's more, Los Altos Play School has the best elements of education for this age, prioritizing quality over quantity. In my training in child psychiatry at Stanford, we observed the Bing preschool, a premier historic preschool, and how the teachers skillfully promoted learning by play is also what Tiny Tots does. But a lot of preschools do not. The answer to problems for young children in my training that arose in other preschools was mostly not about something wrong with the child, but rather about the preschool. So many preschools prioritize quantity over quality, using the least teacher resources possible to take care of the most kids for the most time possible. And they have business pressures to do so. But fortunately, this is not what happens. Los Altos Play School and Kinder Prep, the teachers are thoughtful about what they're doing. They've been here for years and years, have developed this beautiful program to be integrated in the community. Every activity, every day is carefully and thoughtfully planned out with plenty. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
That's all.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to make a comment on anything not on our agenda? Okay, well, I would like to thank everyone who has made a comment tonight. California law, specifically the Brown Act, says that we are not allowed to engage in a discussion now because it is not in place on our agenda ahead of time. But yeah, I can tell you that your comments have been heard by all 5 of us. And I invite you, if you would like to email a copy of your comments or additional comments, you're certainly more than welcome to do so. You can mail it to the City Council, or you can also mail it to our public comment email address to make it a part of our formal record. But thank you very much. Next item of business tonight is our consent calendar. I'm going to invite public comment from anyone who wants to speak on any of our 7 items that are on consent. It is possible that one or more of these items may be pulled off of consent, and we will discuss them in more detail later in the meeting. However, there will not be an opportunity for members of the public to speak at that time. So if there is anything on our consent calendar upon which you would like to make a comment, now is the time to do so. Madam City Clerk?
I have no speaker cards.
Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to make a comment on our consent calendar? Okay. Then I will ask my colleagues on the council, does anyone want to pull any of the items off of consent? Councilmember Liang?
I'd like to pull agenda item 3.
Okay, that is to adopt a resolution adopting the city's mission statement. I'm going to move that to the end of the meeting, so we will discuss item 3 after item 10. Otherwise, I will, Councilmember Meadows.
Yes, thank you. I don't want to pull anything. I just want to make a comment on item number 7. I don't think that our annual comprehensive financial report should go without note. I actually felt warm and fuzzy when reading it, which is very unusual when reading a financially oriented document. But I can personally see the progress that we've been making with our sustainable budgeting and policy decisions. And so thank you to June, thank you to City Manager for getting us to a warm and fuzzy ACFR.
Thank you for saying that, Councilmember, and I suspect we all share that. I know that I peppered staff with a machine gunned you with questions. Like it's no one else had any questions about it. So, but yeah, no, I spent well over 10 hours poring over it, and it is, like Councilmember Meadows said, it's an indication of how well city staff is doing in modernizing our system and helping us to make responsible and efficient decisions. So thank you very much. Any other comments? Otherwise, I will invite a motion.
I'll make the motion, Mayor. I move that we approve the consent calendar items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Second?
Councilmember Liang.
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows.
Yes.
Councilmember Fliger.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Mayor Weinberg.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you to my colleagues. That brings us on to item number 8, our public hearing for tonight, the establishment of development fees. I will turn it over to staff. Director Zorns.
Yes, good evening, Council. So I do not have a formal presentation since we did discuss this pretty in depth at the last City Council regularly scheduled meeting prior with a study session, but I am going to high level go over what we did discuss for tonight's purposes of orienting our conversation after this. The background, the city has previously never completed an external evaluation, at least that we have documentation over. It has been done previously by in-house executive staff, which is not within the best practice of having a comprehensive evaluation, which should be done typically every 3 to 5 calendar years in order to be able to make sure that we have an independent analysis regarding our cost for services. The current study did evaluate what I refer to as the development services fee schedule, since it does comprehensively establish new fees for building, planning, and land development engineering. And there was a component of the analysis which is a comparative survey of other jurisdictions. However, it does specifically look at the cost to actually provide each individual service based on where we are at in the market with our existing staff and operations and what is codified today. The objectives of our entire process, one, it was an initiation of a program established in our housing element, but the objectives from that is to streamline the fee structures, establish compliance with Prop 218 and 26, is to also look at the average time allocations and assumptions for each individual permit type or project that is reviewed within the city. And then to look at the fully burdened hourly rates that is established during the evaluation. Inevitably, what this results in is an updated fee schedule, which is what was presented to the council at the last meeting. The methodology, as previously discussed by our consulting group matrix at the study session, was predominantly an average time by position title per permit and per application. Multiplied by then the fully burdened hourly rate per position title, which then equals the full cost of what is the cost for the service. As a result, as we covered for generalized numbers, is the city is, as present day with our existing fee structure, we are under collecting by $1.9 million. We are at a cost recovery threshold of 79% for the building division, 34% only for the planning division, and for engineering 57%, which brings it to a blended rate of an under collection for development related fees of cost for service of 66%. So we are under collecting by a minimum of 1/3 across the board with the spread taken into account. The key outcomes were created flat rate fees, which is very consistent with industry standards for things such as water heaters, single family charging stations, so on and so forth. Reevaluation of the percentage-based fees for engineering. This is to ensure that the improvement inspections and utility cuts are appropriately assessed. And as well as created new permits that have historically not been established and been billed against by an hourly rate. And then we also did have to look at our surcharges. We have for quite some time had a technology surcharge fee. That was one that was evaluated, as well as something new, which was a general plan maintenance surcharge fee, which is very typical in the industry. We created that in order to be able to establish an ongoing fund. As I'll remind the council, we spent approximately $600,000 updating the city's housing element, which is actually on the high end for the industry. Based on the city of our size, but the complexity of the land use and the amount of community outreach and everything really required the facilitation of a dollar amount that high. So this will help us to facilitate paying for something of that nature, let's say for the 7th cycle. So again, we take into account, which is the funding sources, how those are, what is the mixture of the reviews that are actually being done, which then establishes our basis of our fee structure. Obviously, one thing that I will at least note is pursuant to the California Constitution, no fee can be set more than 100% of the cost recovery. So what you did see in the attachment in our fee study provided by Matrix is the center column, or column number 2 of the dollar figures, is the full 100% cost that we would ever be allowed to charge given the current market trend of what we have today in the city. We also need to be fully compliant with any state, local ordinances in order to be able to make sure that we are doing so. So for example, we have a construction tax fee in the city that has been established for several decades. This would not be amending that. That would be something that would be taken to a vote of the people to establish a different rate for construction tax. And then obviously setting the fees to be able to recover the actual adequate amount of the cost for service is something that is our fee consideration, obviously before us tonight. And then obviously, establishing some of our different and standalone fees for our city moving forward. So with that, that's just a comprehensive overview, just to kind of orient our conversation, but I am present to ask any of the questions of the council at this time.
Thank you very much, Director Zorns. I'm afraid you're going to give us heart palpitations up here if you start talking about the 7th cycle HEU. Okay, so it's time for questions from council. So, Councilmember Liang, you want to get us started?
Are we going to take public comment first, or do you want us to take questions?
Questions for staff first.
Thank you again for all the work that you've done on this. So, Director, with the proposed changes of increased fees, how much potential revenue does this increase bring? Because will it take us to the 1.9 or higher?
It wouldn't take us higher. So that is based on a point in time count from not FY, so not a fiscal cycle, but from a calendar cycle. So that was an analysis done from calendar year 23 of essentially what we would have undercollected in a calendar year. So obviously, if the development market were to slow down drastically, we would see a dip just from that in and of itself. But if we were to do the same number of permits that we issued in 2023, we would be collecting the $1.9 million. We would not go above that now.
So you're saying it'll close the gap. But then, as we look at it, what is also being proposed potentially is a reduced rate after you consult the Environmental Commission, or the reduction going down from valuation rate to a flat rate. Does this really close the gap by offering, if we were to?
So the flat rate is for example, for something like a water heater, we're not making money on it because we did have to look at, to establish that fee is based on the hours or the time that it actually takes to actually process that permit. So by looking at the permit specific to a hot water heater, is the valuation, we obviously have been factoring that, that's how we get paid, but we have then calculated the number to result in the 178 that was recommended in the matrix study, that's actually what the cost for service is. So we're not actually really losing money in it. If we actually looked up every single water heater permit, there might be some that we actually lost money on because it could have been under an under-collected threshold based on valuation, because also our valuation thresholds were previously inconsistent with the market.
Okay. So if we are engaging the Environmental Commission to make recommendations regarding fees around electrification, what is the plan to engage the Historic Commission regarding fees around historical preservation?
I'm going to let the city manager.
Councilmember Liang, the council gave direction at the last meeting for staff to review the historic fees and to engage the Environmental Commission for electrification fees.
Okay, thank you. So, one more question. So, how much more money do we anticipate collecting based on the changes we have here tonight?
So the easiest way that I could break it out is a fiscal year to fiscal year, as I would anticipate. It won't be a hard and fast number because of obviously it changes from the way that the analysis would end up being from year to year, whether or not it's fiscal or calendar. But I would anticipate a 21% increase in the building division revenues. I would anticipate a 66% increase in the planning revenues, and I would anticipate a 43% increase in the engineering division's revenues. So again, the blended rate is that we would expect across the board in development services a 33% increase in our revenues. However, that's not like what we would look at in the private market, because private market, that would be looked at as a profit. We are a not-for-profit agency, different than nonprofit, and so we are not collecting money to make money. We're collecting money to cover all of our overhead. That's where the 100% threshold comes in by state law, is that we are not allowed to go above that, which is one of the reasons why some of our fees, as we've currently done in our existing analysis, have to be reduced.
Okay, so with that response, I have one more question. So if you come back, so my understanding is if we adopt what you're recommending tonight, we're adopting all the fees in entirety without any reduced fees, or right now, correct?
Other than the ones that were acknowledged in my staff report that are specific, what you would normally see as it's not really what we would refer to as a subsidy, but it's really public access. So I've personally never worked in the 4 jurisdictions in California that sets the fee at 100% for appeals. You want to be able to provide the access to the constituents to be able to do that. A full cost burden would potentially render that infeasible for some individuals. So the threshold was set at essentially only 25% of what the full cost actually burden is to the city. That's just for an example. So tree removals as well, which this was provided in the council Q&A, was also something that we just established that new fee, which is already a significant increase from what we previously have been doing. But it is a general subsidy still, based on how we have modeled it up until today.
So we would still be providing subsidies. So like, for example, if I look at the photovoltaic solar, from dropping it to 450 to 300, we are still providing subsidy, correct?
Yes, yes, that it would be correct. So it would be a 33% reduction, as depicted in the council Q&A. That, I would say, PV is continued to be evaluated and reduced by the state level, because the streamlining of permit review an inspection review has continued to be a priority of the state to get as many solar producing homes as well as facilities. So when I say facilities, is standalone solar installations in parking lots, so on and so forth. So that's a very big priority of the legislature and what they've granted through the CEC, through the state level grants for large deployments of solar. So we'll continue to most likely see reductions, I would imagine, in the coming years, as well as the cost burden it's being reduced drastically as well as just by the permitting streamlining from the state level of what we are allowed to require in order to get us PV permit is actually very minimal. So the workload for just PV alone is going down.
I understand, but the point is that if we continue to provide subsidies, which we're actually doing, we're still going to be under collecting. Because I thought our goal was to fix the gaps that we have and narrow and stop the under collecting, but yet what we're essentially doing is still under collecting, but just reducing the percentage of under collecting. Correct?
Yes, that would be correct for that. So simple math, though, of what we're reducing it by. So I looked at the numbers is that last year we issued just over 400 residential solar installations. So 400.
Although I'm not looking at just that one thing. I'm
Right,
just saying
but-
it's going to be cumulative, because if you look at the under collecting there and then the other under collecting in the other areas as well,
So the
once
city-
again, we're going to find ourselves in a gap.
So the city for under collection, in regards to the financial subsidy that we would be providing, by offsetting or reducing the one by $150, as you've brought up for PV residential installations, cumulatively with 400 permits times $150 of a subsidy, we would be losing $60,000. That is only 10% of what the city is currently under collecting for just the building division alone. The building division is the highest cost recovery of any services in the city of Los Altos. So anything that's associated directly with a building permit, there is actually less of the subsidy across the board just based on the way that the building valuation table is set up, because it has always mirrored the ICC valuation table, which is set at the national and international level.
Got it. Thank you for answering my questions.
Okay. Are there any other questions from council? Councilmember Meadows.
So Director Zorn's back to the trees, and obviously the timing, we just did the trees, so we're not going to do the trees till some of them get a little taller. But I wondered if you thought, so as Councilmember Liang was just pointing out, this is an area where we still actually have a sizable gap, but we didn't look at this because we didn't have the study when we did the ordinance. And as you pointed out, I think fairly, is we were already raising the rates. So do you have a recommendation or a thought or a reminder, note to self, note to city, when we should look at this again? Because I agree with all the, I'm not challenging it for now, but I don't think it should. It seems like when things go in a drawer, they were in a drawer for 15 to 20 years, and I think that's a little long. So I would like us to have in mind when we might look at this again, and maybe that gets to, does that get to the overall time frame, 3 to 5 years? I don't think that's a question before council tonight, but if you have an opinion, is that when we'd pick up the trees in particular?
I would recommend to be able to, since the city has kind of fallen out of the best practice for a long time,
Yes.
is to not wait until the 5-year sunset. I would wait to the sunrise of the 3-year mark, essentially, to be able to start it over, to be able to, one, either strengthen the fundamentals of what the fee structure is supposed to be. It also helps to further defend the city if we were to be challenged. I will mention, as having fee under protest is not something that's fun to do, and I have had to reconcile it, and it's not a pleasant one. So it helps to further have the establishment of multiple fee studies supporting them essentially concurrently. I would recommend leaving the trees, as you've kind of already mentioned, at least for a solid year of it being in effect. So that we can look at it, and maybe it's something that we could bring back next year and say, well, have we seen a significant drop off, issues where people aren't, maintaining the trees or removing what we want to be removed in general. For example, we're just had a zoning administrator hearing last week, and someone brought up something where it was very much one of the council priorities is that we need to support the removal of trees when they're growing in between and intertwined with our above ground power systems. And so that is a condition of approval for one of the houses that was last week approved, because it needs to be able to facilitate that further continuity and protection for the community. So I think there's a lot of things going on with the trees right now. And so I think us evaluating it a little bit over this next year is a really good practice for us.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to know. And then one last piece, and again, sort of tagging on to Councilmember Liang's. So if we look at, there's a huge list of items that we studied, thankfully. Sounds like externally we've never actually studied this before, but and so I'm going to throw out the 80-20 rule, not to say that those numbers are correct, but it looks like we're actually adjusting and capturing most of our costs in at least 80% of the underage area, maybe even closer to 90%. And when we're not, other than the tree case, which is different, but in the other areas where we're incenting, I think, rather than subsidizing, is it fair to say that those areas are really only a fraction of the overall? I think that's what you were trying to get at with your calculation, but aren't we really making up for about 90% or 85%? You can throw a number out there better than I can in terms of cost recovery.
It would be more like towards, I would feel comfortable saying like 85% is where we would be at, with some minor subsidies to influence the environment, which, like what they say with, federal tax rebates is, the EV rebate was to help influence the environment, to help the early adoption of them. And now that's why it's starting to get phased out, because it's had the synergy now. And so I think that's why you kind of create it, to help influence that environment.
Right. So we're going from about, what was the overall, 66%?
Yes.
To maybe about 85%. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I think the next order will be public comment. So, Madam City Clerk, are there any members of the public who'd like to speak?
One.
Okay, 3 minutes, please. Mr. Mayor?
As a matter of public policy, I think the new fee structure being put in place for historic structures is wrong. Okay, certainly not providing a subsidy. And the answers that were given to questions about historic alteration, which is what I'm going to specifically address, are conflicting. Perhaps you've read them, perhaps you've not. But I don't understand what they mean and what things will or will not be charged. It appears that anything on the historic resource inventory, where homeowners do not have a choice whether they are on the historic inventory, will be slapped with a $7,000 historic alteration cost if they do any kind of remodeling to the exterior of their home. Right? Clear as mud whether that's in fact true, because the information, the granularity of these fees does not provide the kind of guidance and help that homeowners need to have when they ask the question, what is this going to cost me? And I know Councilman Daley has done his math on people who have Mills Act, and for them that should be a no-brainer that they can afford all these additional fees. But in fact, for people on the historic resource inventory, that's not an option for them. And in fact, people who have landmark status and have Mills Act, there are substantial costs for historic renovation, and adding fees into that just goes against the public policy, which is to encourage people to restore and preserve those properties. By putting these fees in place, you actually encourage people to defer maintenance. Why should I spend $7,000 on a permit? I'll wait 10 years until I have a whole bunch of them, a whole bunch of things that have to be done at once. That's not really good. It's not good for the community. It's not good for the housing stock. And furthermore, the way we think about fees, the way we think about historic preservation actually discourages our preserving homes, okay? We have a 1910 house nearby us, which is being torn down as we speak. There was a barn from the 1900s on El Monte that the homeowner made a decision because it was not, quote, historic. They tore it down. Do you know how many barns there are in Los Altos? Damn few. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bear.
I have a question. Based on comments heard.
Mr. Bear, would you like to entertain a question?
No, for staff. For staff now. Because, Director Zorns, we just heard from a constituent about the lack of clarity or understanding about the fees. Because these fees are new fees, will it be your intent to create a documentation to help explain the new fees and clarify what, or try to simplify the messaging on how these fees will be charged?
So, for example, with the historic alteration permit, we would, as a part of the handouts that we already have for historic resources and the historic alteration, we would integrate the fee onto that handout and then help further establish and elaborate when it's applicable for what. And then that would kind of help direct staff as well as the public to know this is when the fee is going to be something that is applicable to whatever process or alteration is being sought after at that time. So that's really, we don't really do it in the fee schedule itself. We do that as a part of the handouts for each individual process, so that the public can understand what the process is and what the fee is associated with some of those processes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there's going to be some handouts to help educate the public. So can we get this information as well onto the Historical Commission website?
Well, yeah, so it would live on the city's website where we already keep some of our historic kind of references for, what the alterations and advisory reviews are. And we'll obviously have to acknowledge, now that there is a fee structure associated with it. So we might need to further expand on what those handouts already state, because the issue has always been, or not been an issue, is that there's never been a fee associated with it. So we've never had to explain that component. So it's not been a part of the conversation. So we'll just have to revisit those handouts to make sure that we adequately elaborate what is necessary for those specific fees and those specific regulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so before I open it up for council discussion, I just kind of want to frame a little bit where we are right now in the process and why we're doing things the way that we're doing. At our last meeting, when the council first discussed and examined the Nexus study, the decision was made to go ahead and bring all of our fees up so that it would be almost 100% recovery. As Director Zorns has explained, 85% is probably closer to it, but we had a thorough study that was presented to us, and even though there are things that we want to give an incentive to the community to do, such as electrification, we didn't want to shoot from the hip and start reducing fees. I think that it's clear that there is at least a supermajority, if not unanimity on the council, that we want to provide an incentive for people to electrify their homes. But what we directed staff to do was to take it to the Environmental Commission, let them really chew on it, bring recommendations to us. That doesn't mean we're going to rubber stamp them, of course, but it would be a more thorough analysis where we could ask questions. It would not be the so-called shooting from the hip. We're reducing this. I think this is a good idea. It would be a more thorough analysis. And I am cognizant of the promise that I made to Councilmember Flygore, which I consider to be a promise to the entire council and the community as a whole. And I'm sure staff understands this, that as soon as, with respect to electrification, as soon as the Environmental Commission has made its recommendations, we want that to come forward as quickly as possible. But electrification aside, the fees that are being established today can be changed by the council through the process of reexamination and passing an ordinance. We have simply made the decision that if we are going to adjust the fee schedule for some purpose, we're going to do it after having a thorough understanding of what it is we are doing, what are the implications of that, what are the goals, and what are the consequences of going that route. So that's why before us right now is simply a schedule that brings us all the way up to what the Nexus report says. I don't think any of us anticipate that this is going to be the last we hear of it. And with respect at least to electrification, hopefully they'll be coming back to our agenda sometime in the next few months. Okay, so having said that, I will look to my colleagues either for discussion or a motion. Councilmember Liang?
Before the motion is made, I did want to make a comment. I am disappointed that we are consulting the Environmental Commission and not consulting the Historical Commission. It does trouble me that, I understand that that's what the Environmental Commission will do, is to advocate for incentives for the electrification. But I'm disappointed that we're not going to really hear from the Historical Commission on how this will impact preservation. So I know that we always acknowledge on Preservation and History Month how valuable our historic homes are in our community, but I just feel that we're not giving the same respect. So I did want to make that comment before we make a motion and moved on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Councilmember Liang, for pointing out that there are some differences in our approach. I would like to comment on that difference because we have our priorities that we set for the year, and it's without a doubt that electrification and environmental concerns are certainly our priorities. But I would also like to comment on those two commissions and their structure and purpose. Since I've been liaison for both of those commissions, I can tell you the History Commission isn't for reviewing policies of this nature and fees of this nature. That's not what they do. And moreover, commissions in general take up issues that we assign to them. And it doesn't mean, as we've heard from some public commenters earlier tonight, that every policy gets reviewed by commissions. That's not the way it happens in town. There are things that council wants to put on the commission plate, and we have chosen, in this case, to have the Environmental Commission review certain fees for how they will impact our overall priority that we have established. We did not establish preservation as a priority, and what we are talking about is fee recovery from a class of residents that represent, or from a class of properties rather, that represent probably less than 1% of our entire community. And I personally don't think that our scarce resources should be used as incentives for that particular narrow parochial interest. I think instead our scarce resources should be used for our major priorities like the environment and housing.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
I see Councilmember Meadows is getting ready.
It's page 300.
It's taking me a while to get there. Boy, it really is taking me a while. So I move that council adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Los Altos setting certain fees and charges to be collected in fiscal 24-25, and find that this action is statutorily exempt from CEQA under CEQA guidelines.
Second.
Yes. And I think, is it a separate motion, or would I go on to say, and direct staff to amend the city's
You can make that in the same
in
motion.
the same motion? Okay, so if you hold the second, and direct staff to amend the city's finance policy to include a provision for annual adjustments to the master fee schedule based upon CPI.
Second.
So friendly amendment. So I know you said your motion was to adopt the certain fees. I think it would be fees recommended by the consultant and listed in the report.
Right, so I can add the,
yeah.
yes, I'll
Thank
add the
you.
specificity.
Yeah.
So instead of reading, as it said, setting certain fees and charges, but setting the fees and charges as recommended in the staff report based on the Nexus study.
And is that the exhibit to the resolution? Because if you're
I-
adopting
and
a
the-
resolution,
yes.
it's part of it.
Yes, and as attached in the exhibit to the
So
resolution.
just for clarity then, the resolution.
This is why I don't
The
make
motion is to
motions, yeah.
adopt the resolution,
Yeah.
including the
Sorry.
fee schedule attached as the exhibit to the resolution.
I accept the mayor's friendly amendment.
The full fee schedule.
Second. That's my role.
Councilmember Liang.
Yes.
Councilmember Fliger.
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Mayor Weinberg.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you all. And with that, I will close the public hearing. We'll move on to our discussion items. Item number 9 is a review of our housing element annual progress report for calendar year 2023. Is there a staff report?
Yes, Council, I'm going to actually give a presentation because I think that this is good for visual enjoyment and discussion. It's a very colorful presentation tonight. So this presentation, I'm actually giving this because of the variety of individuals that really were warmly receiving of this with the League of Women Voters of Mountain View. I had several people that I've never met and do not even live in Los Altos that wanted to see this because they want to be able to probably harass their own cities to do more. So Los Altos housing element implementation and progress. Background as to why we are here. Some cities do not adhere to this, but pursuant to Government Code 65-400, it does require the city to take forward an annual progress report to the legislative body, so the city council. If this was the county, it should be going to the Board of Supervisors for a brief discussion, but this is always required by April 1st annually. Further, the APR, it does cover the jurisdiction's status and progress in implementing the housing element specifically. OPR actually also has its own annual progress report that's specific to the other elements, which does differ than this particular report. So obviously, just to cover, is the council last year, January 24th, adopted our housing element. We then in September on the 5th were certified by HCD. And then as of November 28th last year, we did complete all of our necessary rezonings, which was 2 months in advance of what we were statutorily required to do. So the housing element implementation is really kind of something that has been obviously a very big work in progress for us the last 14 months. And as I mentioned, on November 28th, we did complete all of the necessary rezonings with also subsequent actions. I'm going to kind of touch on just a lot of our successes over the last year. Not all of them, but some of them that really do resonate and have helped to change the regulatory environment for the better to be able to create more housing now. So Program 3H, we amended the design review process and those requirements, which was to eliminate the design review commission, eliminate third-party architect review, designate the director for the review of 5 or fewer units, limit the number of hearings to a maximum of 3, and remove the city council from final approval authority and assign only appeal authority. This is consistent, as we know, with our other jurisdictions nearby. Further, we standardized the multimodal transportation requirements, which was to eliminate the purview of the Complete Streets Commission from housing developments. And then we also did Program 3L, which is to eliminate the requirement of story poles. Further, in Program 3B, we modified building heights in all of our mixed-use zoning districts. We also further, in Program 3C, removed the FAR limitation that was placed only on 2 properties within the city. Program 3F, we reduced or eliminated the conditional use permit requirement for residential mixed-use multifamily. That was an outdated land use practice and a way to control residential development in several decades ago in other jurisdictions as well. So it was a common trend, but not really consistent with today's rules. And then further to amend conditional use requirements when CUPs were required. However, we did eliminate the requirement of a conditional use permit in its entirety for housing developments. Again, that's inconsistent. We regulatorily have oversight in our design review functions. And so we were really creating a duplicative process. And so we do our design due diligence and we zone accordingly for the allowed uses. Program 3N, we modified the R3 zoning districts, which resulted in increased height, lot coverage, FAR, and then reduced setbacks. Program 1A, we did rezone for our RENA shortfall, which was for our above moderate housing units, which is usually the ones you don't have to really worry that much about in regards to the fact that no city has a problem creating market rate housing, which we facilitated by the rezoning of all districts or all of the districts that were or all sites within the districts of 08 and CN, which helps to further facilitate that buffer that we're required to have. Program 1B, we did facilitate higher density housing in the commercial thoroughfare or the CT district. We eliminated the density cap throughout the CT. The City Council in the last several years has approved density bonus applications of close to 200 units per acre, and that has been the trend for the last 6 to 7 years. So that density cap was no longer applicable for the district. Program 1C, we are now allowing housing in the office administration district, as we all know. And then 1E was to rescind in its entirety the Loyola Corner specific plan, which has been largely unenforceable since the Housing Accountability Act, as well as has hindered development for the last several decades since it was initially adopted. So with that, we have also rezoned the Village Court parcel, which had dual zoning and inconsistent zoning for a regulatory environment that would facilitate any development, actually. Rezoning the sites from our previous 5th cycle housing element, we had several sites that were left over, and so those have been rezoned to match. Program 1I, allow our residential care facilities consistent with law. That just means that they are viewed as a housing unit and nothing special or specialty in regards to a special review like a CUP, so on and so forth. And then we did our specialized housing ordinance, which is for programs 4C, 4D, 4E, and 4F, which is to allow low cost or low barrier navigation centers, allow transitional and supportive housing, allow employee and farm worker housing, and then obviously to provide reasonable accommodations for disabled persons with the housing needs as applicable. Implementation to date, I could have kind of just gone over this, but I think it's great to kind of show the kudos to the city as well as the council for its support in passing what has then resulted in what could be seen as very few actions, because there was a lot of other things that were covered in very big, long, robust reports and ordinances. So in the last 428 days, the city council has adopted 4 resolutions and 10 ordinances, which though correlate to an amendment to 27 supplemental appendices that have been attached to all of those resolutions and ordinances, which is just over half of our entire zoning code. So we have, for all extents and purposes, done a very large, what we call in the planning profession, an omnibus. We have just bifurcated it into essentially 10 or less actions. And with that, we have also approved 4 contracts. I will kind of touch on a couple of those briefly in the following slides before I finish. But I do want to talk about progress towards RENA. I will at least acknowledge last year was not a great year. It was a slow year, but that is an economic factor that we, as well as all cities, cannot really overcome with the high interest rates. Thankfully, we have seen a 2% reduction. Hello? 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 We hear it in there. Hello? It's warm in there. No.
Gabe, you got to pay the bills on these things every month.
Hello? It's back on now. Yes. So as I was mentioning, is our progress towards RENA. It wasn't as high as I would have preferred it to be in our first year, but that is okay. There was a council Q&A, so this is why I actually created this. So last year we did only issue a building permit for 1 low-income unit. We were hoping to have issued for other specific sites that are approved and either in building plan check or are kind of sitting tentatively waiting to pull their building permit. So I would say this year is actually going to be quite the successful year, just even knowing of one project off the top of my head, which I will kind of cover at our end of the slides. But so with this being said, is we, just under 120 units is what we produced. Of that, though, I wanted to at least make sure that we do keep in mind is that that's not a loss. We have a very large allocation of 843 units for above moderate, which is market rate units. We do have to be concerned with making sure that we are providing that. And obviously a city that is at build out in our single family districts, we're not going to see a big proliferation of single family home in regards to what HCD refers to as net new. We are going to see a lot of rebuilds, and that's okay too, but it doesn't count to our housing stock. So we need a net new in order for us to make a dent in the above moderate. So we have some additional work though that is upcoming. And this slide kind of helps represent is that in February, a couple of things that we just did, so I'm still going to talk about them in present tense and upcoming. We did submit for our pro-housing designation with this with the state that will help to open us up to additional state grants for affordable housing, or at least make us more competitive in the process. We have also kicked off our safety element update, which is a comprehensive general plan element update. So that is specific for the safety. We have also started our ADU accessory dwelling unit comprehensive code update that was just reviewed by the Planning Commission last week and will be before the council in April. We have also obviously now adopted our fee study, so I didn't want to put that on there too soon, but we did now adopt our comprehensive fee study for our development fees. In April, I am hoping to bring back to the council our development impact fee update, which is a different component of what we will be reviewing. And then also in April, we are hoping to have an SB9 Planning Commission study session, which has been on the books for about a year and a half for us to bring back what was originally approved at the end of 2021. So we want to kind of re-review what we did and see if there's some things we need to enhance in order to help support housing production under those guidelines. And then in May, we are hoping to have the final architectural designs for our accessory dwelling unit of city standard plans, which then means we will enter them into building plan check to have permit ready ADU plans for residents to be able to come in and pull over the counter. A lot of the community members are talking about Plaza 7 and 8 because we have talked about it for a while. This was initially something that was designated in our downtown vision plan. So it's been several years since that has been adopted. And in program 1H, we did say that we would facilitate housing on city-owned sites. Myself and our housing manager have been consulting with HCD because we do have to obviously make sure we adhere to the provisions of the SLA or the Surplus Land Act. And so we are trending on hopefully releasing for an RFP in summer of 2024. So in just a few months, hopefully. With that though, we are currently doing financial modeling of the site so that we can actually see what the financial feasibility based on the amount of affordability and what the size of the lots and potential constraints would actually yield so that we can enter into hopefully a strong negotiation agreement with whoever potentially would respond to an RFP. Downtown parking strategy. As the council and community is well aware, we are undergoing our downtown parking strategy, which in fall of 23, we hired W-Trans, a big transportation firm, to be able to help us complete a comprehensive parking strategy for our downtown Los Altos. The strategy is to help build upon the other plans that have been going on since the mid to late 80s and actually finally carry it across the finish line. This will have a really great toolkit and options for us to be able to deploy in downtown to finally help fix a lot of the short-term and long-term improvements for downtown, which will really help to facilitate transportation, the multimodal access, and then obviously economic vitality for our downtown. Some just streamlining accomplishments I want to hit on before we close off, which is we already have adopted our comprehensive parking ordinance update, which was a really good, robust overview and facilitation of streamlining our code. We standardized parking for bicycle requirements, as that used to be a discretionary action. We did adopt the city's VMT policy, which had been in the works since 2021, and so that is now in place and helps to streamline and provide certainty to the development community. We did adopt our housing in lieu for inclusionary housing fee, so that is another win for us. And then two things that we specifically did allocate ourselves and require of us is two people in the development services department. One was hired in October of 2022, which is a planning staff member that specifically helps to streamline and review accessory dwelling units to help accomplish that housing production. I will at least share as the city is upwards of close to twice of what we were anticipating for ADU production for calendar year 2023. So that is a good thing, and we will be able to continue to keep on facilitating that. We also did do our first annual income survey for how much rent is being charged for those units. We did receive about close to a 50% return from respondents, which is actually very high and very good. Not all of them came back as an affordable rent, but it is good to be able to have some of that data for our future years in discussions about our housing stock. And then in November of 23, we did finally have our boots on the ground. Monica Malkasian start with us, which is our housing manager, and who will be the successor of Alta Housing as we continue to bring things in-house and have the local control and oversight over our below market rate administration. And then in February, as I mentioned previously, we did submit for our pro housing designation. So those are some really great successes, and I think worth pointing out. Something I'm going to cover because some community members have pointed out and given me fun nicknames over the last almost 2 years, believe it or not. It's been a long time together already, Council. But in May 2022, when I inherited the Community Development Department, it was a department of 3 divisions: building and safety, planning and zoning, and sustainability. In July of 22, the city reorged for its first time, which then left me with building and safety. I inherited business licensing and planning and zoning. This did help to actually facilitate quicker issuance of building permits, as a business license is required to obtain a building permit. And then in November of 2022, did a shuffle, not a reorg, where I kept the 3 from July and then added code enforcement. In earlier that year, code enforcement was really kind of specifically designated something by state law, which requires the city, all cities, to establish a program where if a tenant has an habitable complaint or violation, the city must go and do an inspection at no cost and be able to provide a written report, which then documents the potential violations of anything public or not public, health and safety related for the structure. So that's something that was an additional requirement of the city, which is why we also adopted the International Property Maintenance Code, so that helps to facilitate any potential violations of actually correcting them and not just having to refer them to the Santa Clara County Housing Authority or Office of Supportive Housing to be able to get further assistance and guidance. And then in July of 2023, the Development Services Department came the one-stop shop, which is building, business licensing, code enforcement, housing, land development, engineering, sustainability, and planning and zoning. So if anything is going to get developed in the city for private development, it's a one-stop shop to make sure that all of the development is going through and not getting held up without oversight and understanding that someone's waiting on something. I can say that happens in a lot of different agencies, and when you have things bifurcated that actually involve private versus public, and instead of what is traditionally thought of as engineering versus planning versus building, it's the respective disciplines don't need to be siloed and bifurcated. They can be integrated, and really more so do, if you need to, the division by public versus private, which is kind of what's facilitated now with development services and the Public Works Department. And then just quick update and status of projects, as we do get questions on this for sure, because we do have some bigger lingering projects that once they pull building permits will be a great facilitation of housing. 330 Distal Circle is still actively seeking their building permits. They're working on those. They have an uncommon construction method, so that does require a little bit more of special building plan check review and analysis, and they also are just a little bit more detail oriented when they do their resubmittals and take their time in regards to that. They are still determining project financing. Unfortunately, they did not get awarded the Supernova dollars recently, but hopefully optimistic is the group still. So I believe that they will figure it out, and that is going to hopefully progress in the near future. 4350 El Camino Real, no building permit application to date. That is unfortunate, but we are hoping to see something in the near term. 4848 El Camino, there is building permit approval and ready to issue. So we will see if that moves forward this year, or if they come in, which we could also anticipate as a potential project redesign, which would be resulting in additional housing units, which is a win for us all. 4896 El Camino Real, so a lot of the activity in the corridor is anticipated actually for not an entitled project yet, but anticipated to go to hearing this coming summer. They have been moving fairly steadfast since they submitted late summer of 2023. So under a year in regards to getting them to hearing of going back and forth on their projects. So that's very exciting. 4898 El Camino Real. This project does require what is called an AMMR, which is an alternate materials and methods request with county fire. There are some large transmission lines that almost intersect a corner of the property, so its relationship to the building face do require a special type of material and consideration by county fire. Otherwise, they would have been hit with several hundreds of thousands of dollars in undergrounding something that isn't necessarily beneficial to them and their project for providing power supply. Now, bless you. And then 5150, which is the one that I mentioned and will now kind of be elaborated on, is we did facilitate a pre-construction meeting actually this month. And they have begun wet utility work. So there is earthwork that has begun on the site, and demo building is anticipated for June of 2024 as long as nothing else kind of pops up. So I do anticipate full construction to commence this year, which would be a big dent of almost 200 units towards RENA. So that is very successful. And thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Director Zorns. I was not anticipating that presentation tonight, but I'm glad that we got it. I don't, in my mind, I know that we've done a lot of work, but I had not thought cumulatively of how much we have done. And I want to congratulate my colleagues on the council for really making the determination that we're going to get our housing element updated, and then this council really committing to actually doing it. And a huge measure of gratitude to the city staff, Director Zorns, to you and your department, the city manager, and everyone else on city staff. That's, I think it's quite an amazing record of achievement. So thank you to staff for helping us get there. So I will turn it over to my colleagues. Does anyone have any questions?
So I'll go after Sal.
Okay, Councilmember Meadows?
I don't need to go first, but no, okay. All right, so I remember these updates, not so fondly before, looking like very complicated spreadsheets, and they spewed numbers. Has the format changed, or you've chosen to reinvent it to really show the scope of what has gone on? And I'm asking that because I love to complain about that spreadsheet, which maybe never did get corrected with the old net new versus just new. So could you give a little context, because this looks very different than that hated, dreaded spreadsheet that we've seen in the past?
So that spreadsheet still very much exists. You're just getting a condensed version of it. One of our housing advocates actually sent me a very exhaustive list of some questions that I actually thanked them for in person, because it helped us realize a couple of things that have since been amended in the final spreadsheet that has to be sent electronically to HCD independently of this action. It doesn't really change the numbers or anything. It just further clarifies and refines everything. Unfortunately, I've worked in California since 2016, and every January the spreadsheet changes. So there's no way to start working ahead, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that they stop adding sheets and columns and rows to this. But it unfortunately, it does keep on changing. So you're getting a consolidated version of it, and kind of what I think is the most digestible. I will, at least also further point out is just because the numbers sometimes don't make sense to people is really the numbers that are the most important, at least for the RENA number, is when you issue a building permit. And they're really kind of concerned with everything else in the spreadsheet is about tracking and making sure the city's doing our due diligence in getting them to that point. And not having the local essentially obstruction issues that has previously happened with prior to some of the housing laws. Like for example, I will at least just acknowledge, we have a lot of construction on First Street, for example, several of which the city manager actually signed off on 5 affordable housing agreements tonight. So there will be 5 new affordable units that are issued to mostly actually teachers that qualified in our first priority ranking. So that is a really big win and success story. However, what I want to touch on is that those were permitted in 2021. So that counted towards the 5th cycle RENA allocation, even though they're moving in now. So it's a 2-year lag essentially of when it gets to get counted. So even though we might have only issued a new building permit last year for one, in 2023 we already are knowing of that's one property, and then I know of 3 others in the immediate block of First Street. So 8 in total affordable families will be able to move into Los Altos, or to be able to have consistent housing and knowing what their affordability is moving forward. So those are huge successes. So sometimes the summary sheet is a little bit disheartening, but like I said, next year we'll talk about it. Might be a really big number that we get to really kind of say this is awesome. We're doing what we need to do.
Thank you.
Councilmember Flagger?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zorns. So I have a few questions. And I want to pick up on this complicated sheet that Biggs used to bring forward to us that we never understood on the issuance of the building permit, because I remember every year that's something we had to have him go over, explaining the difference between, when the building permit is issued versus when it's entitled, so that we could figure out if it was going to count towards the 5th cycle RENA. Like that's something every year we need to bring forward the annual report. We want clarity on. So for 2024, all those projects that you've projected, you're anticipating that we will be issuing building permits. Like that's the trigger that you're using to say all those El Camino along the corridor will count towards our RENA.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then can you explain again the process where we have to constantly review whether or not the sites we had identified in our housing element update are being built for the income level we've identified? I know there's an iterative, like you have to keep looking at it to make sure that we're meeting our RENA numbers. And if we need to make any adjustments, then that's something we need to do. Can you explain that process again?
Yeah, so there is an additional sheet that probably one of the reasons why you used to look at it is probably because they used to do the fit to one sheet, or however it ended up getting graphically displayed. This is because of how robust the APR actually is. There really isn't a way to kind of graphically show it in a one snapshot PDF and actually it be able to be shown to you readily available other than how it's been shown tonight. It's also consistent how we did it last year. But in regards to really what your kind of question is about no net loss. And so we've accounted for our zoning, and we have said in our housing element, these sites are going to carry these units. And that's going to be good and plenty essentially, but we know that's not probably going to be 100% true in the later second half of the planning period. So there is one of the sheets that specifically does denote where you're left on your RENA allocation. So we're right now just over 1,800 units. So the almost 2,000 units has gone down by the 119 units. And so we have been, like I said, obviously we're very concerned with providing the very low, and moderate units. which I will at least acknowledge, moderate units are actually some of the hardest ones to create because it's a bigger gap when you use density bonus. You have to provide more of those units as the overall net. So we will have to continue to monitor them in future years to make sure that we either have sufficient buffer of the other categories, or that we are providing a good dent of all of them across the board. I kind of mentioned this in January is, as of right now, our affordable criteria, BAE is not recommending that we actually change the level in our inclusionary because it's working as of right now. However, is that if we were to really chip away at a significant amount of the low, we might have to evaluate in 3 or 4 years from now and saying we're not going to provide any inclusionary under low, we're going to provide it all under the moderate, and have to actually manipulate the numbers in order to make sure that we're kind of locally ensuring we're getting those. So it's going to be a flexible number we have to kind of move. It's, you know, we refer to it in the density bonus law as the sliding scale, is the amount you provide is the amount of affordable, or deepness of affordability is the amount you provide, and so on and so forth. So it's that moving gradual one way or another. And so we'll have to do that same with our inclusionary to make sure that we're not triggering no net loss unintentionally by providing a deepness of affordability that is more than we actually need per our allocation.
So we don't need to sound the alarm, the fact that we only had 119 units last year. And what I'm hearing, Mr. Zorns, from you is, you know, maybe in 3 years, we'll obviously track it every year, but maybe in 3 years we would do the revisit to make sure that we're still on track. But does HCD also review and track it, and we'll look at the numbers and say, wait a minute, you know, you're in your second year, you're way below for these categories? Or is it the city who has to track it and make sure that however we get there in the 8th year, we do?
No, the Housing Accountability Unit is very active. As I mentioned at the end of last year, they contacted me. The unit also contacted me today about the same issue to be able to verify, because they wanted the signed resolution or the signed ordinances, not just the meeting minutes. But obviously a little bit of delay from the holidays, you know, I had to make sure that I gave that to them. So they are monitoring us for sure, and it's very active right now. So you know, that's partly where they've kind of created the tracker, is like I mentioned, is even though we had specific allocated sites that we had already identified, our program 1A required us to close the gap of our arena shortfall for above moderate. So that's where we were able to add, you know, our sites with the rest of the OA district, for example, because that was, instead of creating the patchwork quilt, we were able to do that. So those sites now live on the inventory for HCD as reported this year. And so those sites will help to be able to create the buffer for the above moderate, and we'll be able to kind of continue to keep on reporting out. But this is partly one of the reasons why I wanted to mention in my very first slide was the government code requires the local agency to report out to the legislative body for this specific, even though it might seem a little silly for some cities based on their housing production, because some cities are, you know, doing a lot in certain areas, especially if they're, in Milpitas, you know, they have the Caltrain and everything where they're able to do TODs. They're able to get a very big density. They're able to get a lot of deepness of affordability because of virtue of the funding sources. We don't have that for us, so we do need to be more delicate and mindful of our decision making in the future years. And that's what this conversation is meant to be, is a public forum for the conversation to say, yeah, we've done a really good job and it's awesome to get that deepness at low, but we need to be more concerned now with moderate, and we need to shift our gaze the other direction.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I wanted to understand. When do we get to that stage? So we're 1 year in, and HCD also will poke us if they feel like we're falling behind. Mm-hmm. Remind me, and I know we discussed it a couple of months ago, so this is all on me, where we are with the idea of creating a housing fund. So we talk about Plaza 7 and 8, obviously Distal Circle. I know we won't raise $4 million to fund any of these projects or even subsidize them, but where are we in that process in identifying some form of housing fund for a city?
So the housing fund, if someone were to exercise their ability to fee out for inclusionary housing, we instantly have a deposit into that fund. We don't really need to create the fund like formally until we have something that we need to put into it essentially. For if we're talking about the investment strategy and everything, that's going to be different. That will be consultation with the city attorney and city manager. But for example, with bringing below market rate administration back in house, is that there's in our affordable housing agreements, there's a 5% payment from the sale. The developer has to pay from the sale of that transaction to the city. Right now, the way that works is that offsets our cost with Alta, so that we're not actually paying out of pocket for the administration as much as we would have to for market or for the going rate of what they would get paid typically. However, with us bringing that in house, we'll supplement some of the BMR administration, like vetting out actual applicants to make sure that that's an independent third party, and that's how you should do it. But then the rest of that will then live in the housing trust because we're being able to bring that in from integration of that. Now, if we have a specific transaction under the SLA with like Plaza 7 and 8, and there was another big lump sum, that would then get deposited at that time. So we have no trend of knowing any deposit that would come in the very near future. No one's asked about using inclusionary. If they did, I would start sounding, the alarm to say, all right, we need to create this fund account so that we can kind of keep it in its own enterprise. But we don't have that right this second. So it's something that is obviously still on our eyes to be able to do. As of recent, there's been a Silicon Valley jurisdiction that is under quite a lot of heat right now for using affordable housing funds improperly. Unfortunately, they were exercising it for legal payments. Yeah. So
housing, because I know it was in the news, and a neighboring city was discussing this, the housing fund, and I thought to myself, where are we with our housing fund? Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
This is the housing fund that you're managing?
Right. My other job.
Councilmember?
Yes. Director Zorns, thank you so much for presenting your full presentation here tonight. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure many people appreciate it as well. And the good thing is that it is recorded, so people can continue to have opt in to view it. So thank you so much for that. The slide where you had all the developments, I was just wondering, because we gave approval to also 40 Main, right? Is that not one of the developments that we will anticipate coming up?
So because of the litigation and the local jurisdiction or the court's jurisdiction over that case and land use decision, with consultation of HCD during the 6-cycle housing element, we were advised not to include it or rely on it as a part of any of our projections for pipeline. However, yes, we still do anticipate that project as they are still actively seeking building permits. So it's just not something that I feel confident in relying on those numbers based on the guidance that HCD provided us. Yes, once they get the permit, we will be able to account for it. But it's not something where the entitlement project status update is based on what we refer to as pipeline projects. And that's not what we consider a pipeline project based on its legal limitations in regards to the court's jurisdiction. So that's why we want to make sure that we rely on the ones that we have full local control over.
Okay. So the slide where you showed the 2023 unit production of 119,
Mm-hmm.
how many multi-unit developments were included in all that? Out of that 119 units?
None, actually. So that is all ADU production. And then I think, yeah, it's not really, there is one that's incorrect. So there's one 4-unit complex that was approved. And then so the rest is through ADU production.
Okay, so why is all ADUs considered above moderate numbers? Because I thought that when we discussed ADUs, not all of them were going to be considered above moderate.
So that's partly where the income data survey and for what they're renting for. So we just completed our first one, so we'll continue to keep on doing that. You have to have a little bit of some data trends from it to be able to rely on it with certainty. And so based on the ones that we were provided before the APR was due, we are not able to count any of them as the affordable units. So that's where that survey will kind of come in handy in the future for us to be able to rely on it.
Okay, so as we do our outreach and how people are supposed to send in information, I thought that some people have accounted that they are renting it to those who are of low income status, and why do those not count as low or very low?
So it's that they might not be the rent that they're establishing or that they're saying it's, so we have a lot of them that are what is just considered owner occupied. So they're not really for rent for,
Right.
So when it's owner occupied, it's different. So some of them have given anecdotal information where it's conflicting. So that's where we have to, this first year is going to be, of doing the survey, which is what we just completed. We're going to have to reconcile it before we can rely on it. Because here's the main issue is without us being able to actually rely on data, and data from 1 year is not enough to make it plausible one way or another. We need to be able to lean in on it for multi-year datas to be able to say, this is what our trend is. And be able to kind of review it year over year. If we were to count for any of them right now, and then next year they come off the affordability level, we then have now triggered adding it back onto the supply. So it ends up being a teetering back and forth. So it's something for us to be able to kind of look at with more data. I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now. We still need more years to be able to collect.
Okay. So I appreciate knowing that the 118 was all ADUs. The one question I wanted to understand is why did we only capture 1 year of unit production in the previous cycle instead of multiple years?
Well, so the 2023 is the first year of the 6-cycle planning period. So it's the fifth has now fully closed. So we do not
Okay.
refer to it anymore. And now we will continue to look at it moving on for the next 7 additional cycles.
Oh, but I thought maybe it would be good to also look at trend and how well we did. So that
The state,
you know
the
what I'm
state,
saying?
yeah, the state looks at it, but we don't. We have to, for us, we have to close the book, and then now we have to focus fully on this. What is important is for us to, and this will actually help us in our RENA allocation and RENA methodology at the ABAG level, for us to make as big of a dent. The work that's really important now is not just that we're gonna maybe not get any allocation in the 7th cycle, but whatever you can do to help achieve as much housing stock in your preceding cycle helps you in the proceeding cycle. So meaning the future cycle, we would be able to really advocate for ourselves where during the 6-cycle methodology, we did contest as a city the methodology in its metrics. But we contested the number, not the methodology. And so that's kind of where you have to look at it a little bit differently. And that's why we got denied upon essentially it being received. So we have to be able to really look at our numbers and see how the data and methodology played into our housing stock production. And then that helps to really kind of pave the way for how we can, as an ABAG member agency, really kind of push the pendulum for the methodology for the 7th cycle, and that's how you tackle it. So the methodology in the regional COGS, so it's a beast of a task, but that's how we would have to kind of look at it. Is so 5th is over, we have to focus fully on 6 and really be able to show our data moving forward one way or another, and if the methodology has worked.
Okay, I thought it would be good to demonstrate, how well to do a comparison and show, so much better that we have demonstrated that we're going in the right cycle, right trend.
I think Councilmember Fleiger.
So through the mayor, if I may, I just want to clarify something and just add to what Mr. Zorn said, because I don't want to get people's hopes up. As you know, I served on the Housing Methodology Committee. I was on the ABAG Appeals Board that heard all the appeals. So very familiar with the process. There is no guarantee for the 7th cycle that even if every jurisdiction in any COG meets their RENA number, it will help them. That's up to HCD and ABAG and the other COGs. Are lobbying for this right now to say you should recognize the jurisdictions that meet their RENA numbers, but there's no guarantee. And with the methodology appeal, like all the jurisdictions except 2, they were denied because based on the legal basis of the appeal. So yes, I think we should obviously aim to meet our RENA goals and do all these great things because it's the right thing to do. It's good for our community and all the other reasons we have all said before. And yes, it may be considered for the 7th cycle, but we're way far from that. And HCD is currently working with the COGS to figure out what that will look like and the different criteria they'll pass down to develop the methodology. So I just want to make sure 3 years from now, you're not saying, but we did so well. How are we not being recognized?
So I do want to go back to my questions regarding ADUs and at what point, like you said, we're doing these studies, at what point then can we capture numbers in recognizing the true levels of the ADUs in our city?
So there's not really a silver bullet for that. We could start counting on it this year. However, then if any of them change next year, then we're immediately adding them back.
Okay.
So that's the thing. It's we're kind of giving ourselves false sense of realization of what the affordability actually is. So I think if we're left with, year after year, it's going up and down, it's better for us to kind of sit on the data for a year or two to be able to say, okay, we see a trend with this one, and that's okay. Because for all extents and purposes, if someone's doing what we call generational housing, where someone's elderly parent cannot afford to live elsewhere or in, extended care facilities for the elderly, having them live on site in a unit that's not owner occupied because they're not the landowner, but they're paying a no cost fee to their own family. So living there rent free essentially, or college students as well, that does get to count back to the housing stock. But again, for college students, it's usually a blip in time, and we're not going to ever know exactly which family member it is. Now, if it's an elderly family member, we might be able to see that trend after 4 or 5 years is, oh, they're living on site now. I, for example, right now have one individual that's looking to do 2 ADUs on their site as it's allowed. And it is for each of the mother-in-laws to live on site. Sounds scary. No.
And then something like that, we can count towards lows.
Correct, yes.
Yes, just making sure.
Yep.
Because my concern is making sure we reach the numbers for low and very low as well. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor? All right. Oh, Councilmember Fleiger?
Mr. Zorns, can you explain again the cap for ADUs? I remember there was a formula to cap the number of ADUs we could count towards our arena. And I don't remember it. I'm really asking because I don't remember. But I know there was.
There was,
formula.
but so that was in our housing capacity. So that we didn't have to over rezone sites, our housing capacity, we had to, I want to say it was like in the 50s maybe a year. And that's where I was saying is that we've, no, it's actually in the 40s a year. And that's where I was saying is we've actually doubled capacity for calendar year 2023. So that's where we generally see, higher levels of ADU production once you start changing the regulatory environment. It's not that we can't count them. We count them regardless. It's just whether or not we are able to count them in the capacity assumption. so we didn't have to rezone additional sites if we didn't need to.
Very helpful, thank you.
Okay, let me open up the floor to public comment. Madam City Clerk, do we have any cards?
No.
No
I was looking
cards,
to see
and
if they were going to run up.
I see the usual suspects in the back. No one's rushing to the front. So I will close public comment
One
and
of
bring
you
it back to the
commissioners, don't move
council.
too
So
fast. No.
would any of my colleagues like to make a comment or make a motion? It's on page 316. Mm-hmm.
Is it just adopting the resolution?
Yes.
I move that we adopt resolution number 2024-number to be added of the City Council of the City of Los Altos, accepting the Housing Element Annual Progress Report for calendar year 2023, and authorizing staff to submit the report to the California Department of Housing and Community Development.
Second. Oops.
Do we have to waive any
Yes.
sequel?
Do you want me to amend it?
Go ahead.
Okay. And find that this action is exempt from the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act per sequel guidelines, section 15378B5.
I accept that amendment.
Okay, I'll be glad to second it.
Councilmember Meadows,
Yes.
Councilmember Liang,
Yes.
Councilmember Flagger,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Daley,
Yes.
Mayor Weinberg.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much to my colleagues, and thank you very much to staff. So it's about 5 minutes before 9. We have 2 items to go. So I will look at my colleagues. Do you guys want to try to press through, or do you want to take a quick break? Okay, let's come back then. Let's try to come back at about 9:05 or so.
that they want all the information and activities going on. Because if you don't regularly go see those sites in which they're posted, or a lot of people don't use social media, so just having some consistency and regular practices would be great. So that's what we wanted to talk about. So
Okay, so let's then move on to questions to the council members. And my question is this: is there a specific ask that the two of you have for this council tonight?
I have a specific ask, and that is that council directs staff to come back to us with a draft policy that covers how these communications are done. Am I accurately?
And procedural steps, what commissions should do to.
Yeah, I don't want to predetermine what that policy should be, but
we'll leave it to staff to.
Yeah, and bring a draft back that we can have
Correct.
a policy discussion on.
Correct.
Vice Mayor, what is these communications? Well, I'm not following, so that's all. Sorry, Mayor, go
For
ahead.
starters, it would be any official communication from the commission, be it a survey, be it a announcement of an event, be
Correct.
it, literally.
Workshops.
For now, I guess we'll constrain this to any official communications from the commission, a commission. What is our written policy on how those communications are managed, and that's what I'm looking for.
Okay, and then I think I heard you say it, that you wanted staff to come back with a proposed policy, but you didn't want to, I guess, put your thumb on the scale to tell them how to do it. But if they're coming back with, I don't know how they do that. I don't know how they draft a policy without a majority of council saying, this is the gist of what we want the policy to be.
Okay. I think we kind of named some majority of the 5 points, clear points, saying that when surveys go out, they need to inform council. That's one, because it's important for us to find out about them before. A lot of times it's like, oh, I didn't know this survey went out. And I go, what survey? We need to be in the know. So, and as well as the workshops they host. So making sure council is notified, that's number one. Important to outline the consistent practices that will be utilized for outreach, whether that includes sandwich boards, social media. The social media goes out through the information officer, and it lists all the tools that it'll be utilized, and that way all of them will be using the same thing, and what steps to go through. Like, the information needs to go to the information officer, and the information officer will be posting it on Nextdoor or Twitter, and it would be also, if there is any rollout of any outreach information tools like that was discussed, it should come to council for us to weigh in as well, instead of the commission adopting.
I'm sorry, your third point is you want any tools to be pre-approved by council?
That would be good. And then that way we can better understand and learn about it as well. Then we can understand if it goes to just that one commission as a pilot or rolled out to all.
Great. So I don't think I got your fourth point.
The fourth point is that perhaps establishing a sign-up notification, just like how people sign up for getting notified for commission.
And your fifth point was?
Understanding consistent, making sure everything,
understand the survey tool, and the methods, all the similar methods, right? And then the sign up and,
Those are the 5 I have.
okay, thank you.
Those are the 5 I have.
Okay. Are there other questions from council for either Lynette or Pete?
Let me just add one thing.
Sure.
I think Councilmember Liang and I mostly agree on this. I would only very slightly differ that I think I probably have less of an appetite to micromanage the process and to be, approving each tool and so forth. I would hope that, my own preference would be that there would be a dedicated staff person that would be in charge of most of that. And I do think we should be notified when these things are going out, but that doesn't necessarily have to be, a step in the process where there might be an intervention. It could just be a passive notification, hey, this survey went out. I would be happy with that. But it's up to this body to decide where we are, to develop consensus on what direction to take the policy.
So the reason, sorry.
No, finish your presentation.
The reason why I advocated for it to come to council is because there's always, might be a financial impact tied to it, and we need to be aware of it. And that way, we can know if it is worthwhile for them to move forward on it.
Councilmember Flagger?
I'm curious, Vice Mayor and Councilmember Liang, and I realize a lot of the points I want to make I should save for the discussion, so I'm going to try to frame this as a question. So the 6 things that I jotted down based on both of your suggestions, I'm curious why you think we need a policy for these things as opposed to, because I could go through each one where we can give direction to staff and we know our city manager is very responsive to our requests. And so I'm just curious, why a policy? Policies get, you can violate a policy and then what's the recourse? I'm just curious, I'm curious, why are you asking for us to support a policy with these elements as opposed to just giving direction to staff that these are the things we want to see done?
Not necessarily a policy. What I see is a procedural handbook type of documentation. That's what I see. So we're all on the same page. We're not micromanaging, but it's clear guidelines. That's what I want to see.
And that makes more sense to me. And Mayor, I have comments on each of the suggestions, so I'll hold them for discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Meadows?
I'm holding for discussion.
Okay. Madam City Clerk, do we have any members of the public who would like to weigh in?
No.
Okay. I will close public comment and bring it back to council deliberation. Councilmember Flagger, do you want to kick us off?
Yes. So I'll start with the suggestion that council be notified of upcoming events. I agree, there have been events that the city has co-hosted or co-sponsored that I wasn't aware of to the last minute or even after the event, and it would have been nice to hear about that event. But again, I think that's something we can ask the city manager to notify council members of events where we're co-sponsors or we're involved in so that we can get it on our calendars. So I do think that's a good thing to do consistently. I don't think it needs to be in a policy. With regards to the survey, I remember a few years ago, this came up, and Councilmember Liang will remember, where there was an ask, and I think Councilmember Liang was part of the group of council members that wanted it, where they wanted us to review surveys before they went out. And back then I opposed it because, to the Vice Mayor's point, we should not be micromanaging our commissions and the commissioners' work. So the idea of giving direction on a consistent approach by our commissions and how they do surveys, again, I think that's something Mr. England had talked about 2 years ago. I think it's fine to give direction to see if we can streamline that some more. I think it's a good idea. If it relates to something where the city will be expending dollars, to Mr. England's point, for those types of surveys, we normally hire a consultant. And so we have city staff, the consultant, working directly with the commissioner. So that makes sense to me. There are other surveys that commissioners, for whatever reason, may want to do, an arch project or whatever it is. Really, we should just leave it up to them to get creative and have fun with that survey. So I really would want to put a line on the types of surveys that we would require city staff involvement. And I think that's easy to define. On approving the tools, I don't think we should be approving the tools. And on that point too, tools change, they evolve. And so if we were to have a written guideline or procedure that said A-frames, the poster board here and all these things, 2 years from now, we may be advertising things differently. I would also be concerned if we're this prescriptive and for whatever reason, staff forgets to post something in one of the 5 spots, right? It's okay. And so I would, there could be suggested spots, accepting the fact that they may not post it everywhere, and I wouldn't want that to become a big issue because one event didn't get posted everywhere. But we definitely should not be approving the tool. And then signing up for notification. I remember back in the day, we used to have a form that people could check a box if they wanted to receive notification. That, again, in my view, does not require a written policy. We just need to implement it. We just need to make sure we create this form. When people come to our council meetings, they can check it, they turn it into the city clerk, they go over to the community center, we have the same forms, they check the boxes, they turn it in. So I think the vice mayor and councilmember Lee Eng have made some very good suggestions. I just don't think they need to be in some formal policy for them to get implemented.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Meadows.
Thank you, Mayor. So I asked myself, and I'll ask my colleagues the question. Well, actually, this question is really for staff, and I know we don't have a staff report, so that's why. But the first obvious question is, what are we doing now? And I think that the answer is we're doing a lot of what we would recommend anyway. We just don't know that because we don't have a staff report. But from sitting on the commissions, I think we know that. The second question is really, what problem are we trying to solve? I think we each have different impressions of what goes on. And if I were to name my personal concern is I don't think one commission should go out and be conducting surveys on their own, and then another commission does a different way. That shouldn't. So I fully support the need for consistency and oversight. But again, back to the question, what do we do now? There must be some level of oversight, I think, because again, back to what's the problem, we shouldn't have commissioners developing surveys and sending them out and, one looks like it, they don't look anything like, they don't look city specific. None of that should be happening, and I suspect it isn't happening. But when I look at what commissions should be doing, workshops are potentially, or community meetings, are potentially part of their job, and sometimes even frequently, depending on the commission. And those are managed by staff. I don't think we have issues there. I mean, if it is, it's just fine tuning on occasion. Because we conduct public meetings or workshops or, public input sessions all the time. The commissions don't do that alone. They get supported by staff. So then we're just talking about these surveys, which most commissions aren't doing or shouldn't be doing. And again, back to consistency and oversight, I would probably hazard to say that no commission should be developing a survey, that staff should be approving the need for a survey, whether it comes to council or not. That might just depend on the issue. But I think most of the time, staff liaison working with the city manager should decide whether or not a survey is justified and have the PIO or whatever office, the staff liaison with the PIO, do it. But again, this is not a matter of policy. I completely agree with Councilmember Fliger. We don't want commissioners spreading stuff through the community that isn't needed for their commission work. And I'm not saying that's happening, but we don't want that. We just want, again, consistency and oversight And we may be 80% of the way there already. I don't know, because we don't have the staff report. So I know what our fears may be. I'm not sure it's a reality. And I'm not talking about social media, because that wasn't on the agenda.
I find myself really in agreement with Nisa and Sally. The only additional comment I would make, and I think Nisa meant to include this, which is to say it explicitly, when a survey goes online, I would request that staff let us know like right away. I think we should know that when there's a survey out there, give us a link so we can take the survey. And of course, that way when residents want to talk to us about it, where we know it's out there and we know what it says. So that really, to me, that I think that's the most constructive request tonight. But otherwise, I mean, I could go on, but I'd really be repeating my colleagues.
So one more thing. The reason why we had to touch upon social media was because we do have people or individuals utilizing that tool to do outreach. But the point is, that's why we need to make sure everyone's on the same page that it needs to go through the information officer and not through, I mean, they can use it to help say these events are coming up, but when they try to inject their opinion.
I actually have a concern about that. I see LAPD updates on Instagram, not all the time, but not infrequently. I don't think that those go through the PIO. So I don't want to set up a policy that's going to make it more complicated and clunky. And the social media updates that I do see that do go out through the PIO, I haven't seen a problem with them.
So I don't think Councilmember Liang is talking about updates. So I wanted her to give an example of a social media. You don't have to name names, but I think I know. So an example of a social media post where you think someone was injecting an opinion, because I actually not sure it relates to what we're talking about, but that's what you just said. Do you have an example of that?
I think we've all seen it, but I don't want to reference it, or I'm not comfortable referencing any. But I just making sure that when people utilize social media to inform public, it's all items. I don't have a problem, but it needs to be where the commission all agreed that we all agreed on this event. Here's the information.
Well, let me just, I don't think any commissioner should be communicating officially for the city on social media.
Right.
Just period.
Yes.
Right?
I agree with
so
that.
any social, so any communication they're doing is in their personal capacity, whether it's well advised or not is otherwise. City manager, yeah.
I think at this stage, there are practical and legal implications to restricting social media use, and if council wants to discuss it, I would encourage you to put it on a future agenda.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor?
So it seems like the consensus is moving in a direction that we are going to give some guidance, right? And with regard to social media, my preference would be that we give some guidance like the memoranda that the city attorney has circulated in the past that just makes everybody aware of what their obligations and limitations are. I don't want to trample anybody's First Amendment rights to speak their mind or anything like that. But of course, we've got Brown Act to be concerned with. And I think as any institution should be concerned, we need to also be concerned with our consistency and our image and things like that. So I'm totally fine with doing this by guidance. I would like to see some not policy, but I would like to see staff come up with some guidelines, I guess.
So
Yes.
I think we all believe that it is prudent for the city manager to send out the email that she was discussing earlier, updated with any new rules and regulations that we ought to know. I think that I'm hearing from the majority of the council that there's not an appetite to bring up a discussion about social media use by individual commissioners. I think that would be an avenue fraught with bad outcomes.
Or council members. I mean,
Yeah.
any of us, we're not representing, it's not any of our business to say, well, and we can share, well, again, we're getting into, never mind. I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
You tried to trick me.
I'll work harder. I'll have to make meetings go longer so you're a little bit more tired. So, Mr. City Manager, the city staff, I think, have guidance on the issues that were brought up and where the council would like the city to go.
So Mayor, I will say a lot of the discussion, the city already has practices on. So rest assured, I understand there are fears. We do have a lot of practices on this. What I heard is we'll make sure we are better at notifying council for events and surveys. We'll work to establish some type of all sign up notification for meetings. And the city attorney will send out the information to council and all commissioners on forums and types of speech and the guidelines and restrictions around those.
Clarification, the all sign up is not just for commission meetings or commission, it's activities and events.
Yes, to the extent that we have the ability to do that, we will make an all sign up for everything that we provide automated notifications on.
And certainly when a survey goes out, just include our email addresses on that survey so that we know that it's been fielded, what the questions are, and can respond to residents in an informed way when we get challenged on the street about paving over the orchard.
And making sure that regarding the tools available, because I don't think that some of the commissions are aware that they can use the sandwich boards and things like that. So I just want to make sure that they all are aware.
For the types of meeting notifications, we usually do advertisements based on the type of meeting it is. So if we're doing community meeting on a road striping project or work on Hetch Hetchy Trail, you're likely to see A-frames because we want people in the location that use the location to see that. We would be less likely to use A-frames for a special meeting that's not tied to a specific location. So I do think in general, we have a baseline for how we do notification, both in a centralized location here, community center online, and then based on the type of event that is taking place, we will do other notification or advertisement specific to the type of meeting that we're undertaking.
Okay, so I want to thank the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Liang for bringing this up. I think this was a useful discussion, and we're going to get some useful results out of the guidance given to staff. So the next item on our agenda is item number 3, the mission statement. Councilmember Liang, you pulled this off of consent, so I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. I was hoping that we would give it some more discussion or some thought because I was just thinking that this was a great start, but to me, the mission statement that I see before me now is a little bit more complex, and I'd like to see it a little bit more simpler. I think that the mission statement should be positive and something easy to remember. So something memorable and something that will be timeless. And I just feel that the one before us isn't as timeless or the concern was that we did not feel like we included everyone in the mission statement. I just feel like we're using words that will now speak to what's happening now. And these are like buzzwords. And I think we need to make sure that our mission statement is positive and uplifting. Something simple like Los Altos is a beautiful place to live, work, and play is simple. I mean, like, for example, Nike believes in recreation, sports, and exercise, but they don't list all those that they want to promote. Theirs is just do it, right? We don't need to list everything that we feel are words that are buzzwords of today. Then we're dating ourselves 10 years from now again, and we're going to go all say, oh, this mission statement doesn't speak to us, and let's change it again. So I'm just concerned that we're just rushing through just to change it and not really looking for the unique aspects that will just be something we could just all be uplifted by, and that we want. I mean, I understand these are words that we want, but it's not uplifting and memorable to me.
Okay, thank you, council member. So we're not going to have a second option for public comment, so I will turn it over to my colleagues, either questions for the council member or deliberation or a motion.
This is semantics, but I'm going to say it anyway. Just do it as a tagline. It's not a mission. I'm sure Nike has a mission, but
okay,
that's,
But I'm
as I
using
said,
it as an
semantic.
example.
Yeah, so.
Vice Mayor.
I move we table the mission statement.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I'm going to make a substitute motion that we adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Los Altos adopting the city's mission statement.
I'll second that.
Okay. Can I ask the city clerk to take a vote on the substitute motion?
Councilmember Liang.
No.
Councilmember Meadows.
Yes.
Councilmember Fliger.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Mayor Weinberg.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you all. Let's move to council member and staff reports and requests for future agenda items. For future agenda items, I actually have two that I would like to propose. One is to raise the pride flag in June. This is the same as we did last year. I have a second and a third.
Do we have to? Yes.
Yes.
We have to-
Yeah. So
Got it.
raise
Yes.
the flag policy requires that we treat it like any other future agenda item. There has to be 3 council members that. Well, I mean, the staff report is just going to change dates from last year. I would imagine it'll be on consent, but I need 2 additional. Okay. And then I'm also going to raise a future agenda item to raise the Juneteenth flag in June as well. Okay?
City clerk might need to know.
Mayor, just so
Yeah.
we have this, for the pride flag, we had yourself, and I heard Councilmember Flagger also agreeing to, who was the third? Or is it,
I think there were at least 4. I don't know if there were 5.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you can say.
and on the Juneteenth flag, I heard the same. All right, perfect.
And in terms of reports, I will say that on Sunday, I attended the Destination Electric at Los Altos EV Showcase. There were lots of cars out there. I'm told that there are actually more cars than there were last year. There were also other electric amenity vendors, so water heaters and electric lawn equipment and induction ovens. It seemed to be very well run. There was good attendance. I mean, there was rain in the morning, but the rain cleared away by the time of the event, and it really looked like that they were getting a very good attendance. So congratulations to city staff, congratulations to the Environmental Commission in Greentown that contributed. There were a lot of volunteers that I saw there, a lot of high schoolers too, and I just want to express gratitude to everyone who helped out at that. Vice Mayor.
So I attended the Legislative Action Committee meeting for the Cities Association, and there's a couple of pieces of legislation that are upcoming that we've been asked to contemplate, and in particular, and I don't have the numbers with me, but Evan Lowe has been working, amongst others, with Los Altos resident and County District Attorney Jeff Rosen to come up with a couple of pieces of legislation that will provide for enhancements, for example, for crimes that are targeting specific religious or ethnic groups that may not rise to the level of a hate crime as it's defined in law now, but it would be an additional tool for the DA and law enforcement. And the perfect example is
A
there
point
was
of order, you're getting
yeah.
into
Oh,
discussion.
sorry.
Can
Anyway,
you just
so
describe?
anyway,
yes.
I don't want to advocate for the policy. Or for the legislation. Just want to let you guys know that it's come up, and Evan has asked various councils to potentially consider writing a letter of support. So we may want to agendize a discussion on those pieces of legislation that are, I would call them law enforcement enhancement, or what would you, Nisa, what would you call them?
No, they're law enforcement, but Vice Mayor, if I may.
Yes, please.
The chair of the Legislative Action Committee sent a list of, I think, 11 bills
Right.
that she hopes the LAC will consider over the next couple meetings. Normally, we agendize these so that we as a council can take a position, so you have direction for the LAC meeting. So I don't know if you want to ask for support to agendize it for the next council meeting, because the next LAC meeting is April 11th. So we have one council meeting before that to at least start the discussion on that.
What do you think? I'm new
Yes,
at this, so I'm
yes.
deferring to your.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Okay.
would suggest that.
Yes,
And
okay.
we.
Thank you for your help,
Sometimes
by
we
the
don't
way.
get through all of them,
Yeah.
but I would agendize all of them and we'll see how far we get.
Okay, so I will forward the list to the clerk to
Yeah.
add to our agenda for the next meeting?
Yep.
If that's consistent with what.
And will staff look to the two of you for information, or does staff need to prepare its own report?
I mean, the chair will have that for the LAC meeting, but this may be before she has that posted. At a minimum, we will have the summary of the bills. That's easy. Yeah. So yes.
Okay, so-
Whatever the
so-
chair of LAC doesn't post before we need to post for our meeting, we will supplement.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else, Vice
No,
Mayor?
that's it, thank you.
Councilmember Meadows?
I have a few. Okay. So the first one, and this question is for Mr. England, and then I'll bring it back to council to see if it's something we want to bring forward. Last year, when we were doing our nonprofit application for grants process, we had discussed possibly revisiting that 1% for arts. We discussed it. I can't remember if it was even added to the tentative, but we're 1 month away from the nonprofit grant application process again. And I'm just curious where we are looking at that. Is it something we need to agendize as a council? Because I know we discussed it, but it was never agendized or put on our tentative.
On the 1% for arts as it relates to nonprofit funding?
Well, the criteria.
Oh, the criteria, I'm sorry.
by which we had established that 1%.
Yeah, so, okay, thank you. I think there's two ways to look at that for council. We could bring the criteria forward for a discussion and review and not look at the fee or the application, or we could look at the fee and the application and then the criteria for review. Only because I've heard both, I think, over the past year. So we can do it either way. If it's to leave it alone right now, but look at the criteria, we can bring that, assuming there's support at the next meeting.
Can I ask another question on that?
Go ahead.
So I know that we discussed it before, but also if we wanted to talk about redirecting how that
Well, that's
one.
it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
That's it.
Oh, sorry, if
Yeah,
you were
go
going to
ahead.
go that
No,
way,
go
I'll
ahead,
let you.
because you'll be my second support then.
Yes, I
If we
will.
would-
Yeah, go ahead and continue.
No, it's for council to look at the criteria we had established for that 1%.
I agree. We should look at
Remember?
that.
Yeah.
We
We
should look at
discussed
that.
it, but we
I just
never
looked at it
agendized
today.
And
I
then
just looked at it today.
possibly
I can figure out why.
redirect, like
Yes.
if, I
So,
think like,
we do need
like
to
if we
look at
wanted to redirect it to housing or something, then,
So-
as well.
That's why I was trying to get clarification. That would be a different discussion that would require, and we can have it if council supports it, but that would not be at the next meeting. That would require the city attorney, I think, to do some work and then a consultation with Mr. Zorns. So if we only want to look at the criteria,
No.
we can bring that back quickly. If we want to look at the fee and the application, that would be a longer process.
Yeah.
So it is both,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
Understanding the current criteria and then considering
Yeah.
redirecting,
yeah.
how that fee is allocated. And remind me, Mr. England, when are we considering the nonprofit applications?
I don't remember the exact date. I know it's coming up. We're getting ready to post, so I can send those dates out to council. So we'll have that. We will be considering fees like the art fee. I don't think we have it scheduled yet, but we have that in future agenda items. So assuming there's support, I guess I would just need to know if council wants us to kick that research into high gear and bring it forward. Or would you like us to do it in 2 steps? Bring the criteria forward now and when the application comes forward?
I think we're going to need the criteria for the nonprofit
Before we get the
applications.
nonprofit.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have to do that and then take the longer view item second, which will eventually loop back to
Okay.
that. But we can't wait for the full study.
I agree.
Yeah, Vice Mayor?
Agree with colleagues here. There's 2 things. One, let's look at the criteria, perhaps next meeting, right? But other aspects of the policy, such as, what's going on in the application and the fee, and I think there may be some concerns about, how we've implemented that fee and that application. And so I would like that to also come back to us after staff, and in particular, the city attorney has taken a look at it, because staff may have some recommendations for tweaking it a little bit, I think.
And, sorry, Vice Mayor, that's the fee, or
The fee and the application.
The application
Yes.
for nonprofit support?
No, in particular, actually, the fee, the 1% for the art
Oh,
fee
perfect.
that we make
Yes, that'll
builders
all come
pay
back. Okay.
on any development in excess, multifamily development in excess of $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
and the fee shall not exceed 200,000. That's the
Yep.
fee that I'm talking about, and how that's implemented. I think we might need to have a discussion on that based on some of the things I've heard, from you, city manager, and so forth about
1, 2, 3.
concerns.
No, I agree with the vice mayor, but also because this is a more comprehensive
Yes.
thing that will come back, the city attorney and Mr. Zorns educating us on if we wanted to redirect any of those funds, what it could, legal implications, all of that.
So we have 3 in support of the criteria itself. We'll bring that back right away, and then we'll have the longer-term discussion after the city attorney has had a chance to review.
Yes.
And then mayor, just 3 more. So we had a citizens association. See, this is what happens when we're this early, right? Because normally I would hold my list, but it's early.
I really like, no, it's okay. You have 2 minutes.
So at our, you want to get out my 10? Oh, or is that your bit? Citizens Association meeting, Mr. England and I attended, and SourceWise came up, and I'd heard of SourceWise, but to be honest, I didn't appreciate what that group does. And apparently each city in Santa Clara County has a seat on SourceWise. It doesn't have to be an elected official. It can be a member of the community. And so I just wanted to, I don't think we need a council meeting to discuss it, but to give Mr. England direction to work with staff to figure out a process to appoint a community member to serve on this SourceWise board. So SourceWise, just quickly, it's a Santa Clara County organization that focuses on seniors and services for seniors, how to help serve seniors in our community. And on this board, there's a representative from each city, there's a representative from the Citizens Association, there are representatives from the county, and they meet regularly and talk and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on programs and services we can do for seniors. And our seat on this board is vacant. So just giving Mr. England direction to move forward.
How come we weren't informed
Yeah,
about
how
it
we
before?
didn't know about it, yeah.
So we're not alone. There are other
okay.
cities,
Okay.
their spots are also vacant. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're happy to bring that back as well, knowing the seat's vacant. We didn't know.
to bring it back to us? Because remember, it's like doesn't have to be an elected official.
Right, but I think,
Yeah.
I think
'Cause-
council would make the
Yeah,
appointment.
because what if a council member
Yeah.
wants to take on that seat? And how often do they meet?
So we'll bring it
Yep.
back to.
I'm happy to bring that back.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
okay.
And then one more, Mayor. Term limits, well, not term limits. So we've all been following, the March 5th primary election with close election results coming out, and it occurred to me that if that were to happen in Los Altos where we have a tie, how would we resolve it? Because we actually don't have anything on our books. We hope it never happens. Councilmember Liang and I know it came down to 6 votes in 2016. And with a congressional race this close, it's not impossible. And so if there's support to direct the city clerk and city attorney to look into amending, would it be, or ordinance, John, Sir Maginot.
I was just talking with the city clerk. It's in the state elections code what to do in the case of a tie.
It is. So, but I thought
But
some
Sunnyvale
cities
did something
So that's what I'm
different.
saying. I think a city attorney, can a city adopt its own way of breaking a tie that supersedes the state process?
Yeah. Yeah, Sunnyvale's a charter city.
We're general.
Oh,
Wow, there
Yeah,
you
the only
go.
way that you can supersede particular state laws is you would have to be a charter city.
Right. No, the
And
city
have,
attorney just
and have
answered the
those rules
question.
in your charter when you
Yeah.
create it.
A lot of charters, we're getting into a discussion, but a lot of charters say they just follow the election code.
Right, but they choose to do that.
But some charters have all sorts of details in them.
Okay, so scratch that
I
request.
thought our code said there had to be an ultimate fighting contest between
Oh,
the two.
Jonathan. So it's a flip of the coin, the state requirement. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember.
I think we looked at that when you guys were close.
I attended the Cal City's policy meeting last week, Thursday. The committee meeting was focused on addressing the continued rise in homelessness occurring in California. We learned how other cities, such as Burbank, was responding to the crisis. We received a presentation from USC Homelessness Policy Research Institution. The legislative team is working with legislators to address the crisis and to provide resources in this area to meet the growing needs. The committee did discuss some upcoming legislation, but no action was taken. And the committee recommended that we continue this item for further discussion at our next meeting. And my future agenda items are that I'm sure we all saw in the news that the city of Berkeley has announced that they have settled their lawsuit by rescinding their gas ban. I was just wondering if we have to, now have to change our codes to comply with the laws now that we are clear on some of the rulings?
Councilmember Liang, right now, we don't have to make any changes to our code based on what has been established. The city attorney, I believe, next month is providing an update in what we're calling the post-Berkeley ruling to council. And then there may be action at that time. There are options available to council should they want to take different steps on reach codes.
Okay, I did want to ask about it because I saw what was in the news. I think the other thing I wanted to request for future agenda items is to agendize revisiting the travel policy. We have a policy that applies to council and commissions with 4 meetings that are automatically approved. All other meetings require council approval. So my jaw dropped when I learned that planning commissioners attended a multi-day event in Long Beach without council approval.
Okay, is there any other support for revisiting the travel policy?
So I just feel that we need to make sure that we tweak it or amend it or
Councilmember, I
revisit.
think you have support from the council for that.
Okay, but I just wanted to make sure we make sure that the policy is fair to all.
I do want to comment on that because I think that's not a correct characterization. We've always offered planning commissioners, I remember when I was a planning commissioner, to attend these training sessions. And I don't see why that should have to come to council. So I don't support it, but I do want to say that that's how we've done it, and it's how our planning commissioners get familiar with the aspects of the law. I learned a lot when I attended one or maybe two of those.
I have no
yeah.
problem, and I
Uh-huh.
support that as
Okay,
well.
good.
But the point is, that's not how our policy is written. So I just wanted to make sure that it's written so it's fair for everyone.
Thank you. All right, is there anything from staff?
One update, Mayor. Council recently asked me when, oh,
I didn't get to talk.
Forgive me.
No, I will not.
No,
He's watching the clock.
It's after 10
No.
now.
But then
All
if,
right.
if we're, the one thing I did want to also make sure, if I don't get another chance to talk, I did want to wish everyone a happy Easter, Passover, and a happy Ramadan.
Okay, very nice. So I don't have any future agenda items today. Probably in the next month or so, I'll be bringing forward some for my colleagues to consider. Well, actually, some of them we have to hear, but that's not what I'm talking about. I wanted to update. I also attended the EV showcase, and I also attended the later that same day was the Los Altos History Museum fundraiser event. Decades. This was the 50s. I did not really dress the part, nor did I dance. And I also attended the Silicon Valley Clean Energy had a really nice, I know Councilmember Flegger was there. I don't think you didn't get there. A send-off for the retiring CEO. And contrary to what you see on social media, I was not singing, I was lip syncing. But it was a really nice event to recognize his 6 years at the helm, and there was, it was a good event. Yes, that's it now.
Thank you.
What's wrong with you singing? Do you not
I don't have
know
a
how to
voice.
carry a tune?
No, I don't.
Mr. City Manager, anything from staff?
just from the last item, the date for the nonprofit and community funding, it's open until April 30th. We're getting ready to do our social media advertising, and council will approve it as part of the budget. So it will be either the first or second budget meeting, depending how that breaks out this year.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else from anyone? Going once, going twice. We are adjourned. Thank you all.